Maker, I'm the all in all. From the dust in the universe to the waters in the womb I surf. I'm the all in all. From the atoms that exist in the sun to the atom that's in Genesis 1. I'm the all in all. From the first king that walked this globe to the last black slave they stole. I'm the all in all. Every living thing you see, all of those things exist in me. I'm the all in all. Supreme team, dominant gene, God in the physical. Rose from the bowels of hell, pardon my visual. Cremators doing their job when they get rid of you. Crabs in a bucket, mind state and kill a nigga too. Civil wars in the hood, letting hammers dance. Playing with them pieces of steel, attract the ambulance. Or a prison bid, now your daughter's sick. Ain't nothing gangsta about leaving your seeds fatherless. So I study self and subtracted crime. It takes supreme mathematics to heal a grafted mind. For the 2 and the 3, you need the 1. The only way to get to the Father is through the Son. I met a lot of dudes on that used to shit. They come and go every day, I'm getting used to it. Far as self go, I'm planted on the square. They unlike to Allah, they planted over there. They don't respect the history, they don't recite degrees. Well, we be using them both to reunite the seeds. Yellow to the brown, brown to the black. Accepted or rejected, you repel or attract. It's been over 50 years, he been gone so far. Now that's a powerful cipher. Peace to Allah.
Estevanico. We've heard stories of European explorers visiting and exploring Africa, but it seems as though Africans were a bunch of primitive people that never left their lands and never had to explore or see other worlds. But one man makes us see otherwise. Estevanico, also known as Esteban De Dorantes or Mustafa Azamori, was born in Azamor, Morocco in 1500 and was said to have disappeared in 1539. He is recorded as the first African to explore North America. There is very little written about his
African to explore North America.
That he's from the Maghreb region of North Africa. However, in some of the recent accounts,
we was here in North America over 2,000 years before they recognized that we was here. Remember, the world was flat.
Meaning the black. Different translations of the Spanish accounts describe him as an Arabic-speaking black man and a native of Azamor. Estevanico was sold into slavery in 1522 at a very young age, while growing up in the Portuguese-controlled Moroccan town of Azamor, right on the Atlantic coast. He was sold to a Spanish nobleman, Andres Dorantes de Carranza. The nature of slave trade in Spain was quite different from what was seen in the transatlantic slave trade. In Spain, the slaves had several paths to freedom. It is not clear whether Azamori,
Portuguese, Liverpool, Bristol, London, those 64 years before we got to North America.
So he must have converted to Catholicism before he was allowed to be a part of the expedition. He was given the Christian name Esteban, which is Spanish for Stephen, after his baptism. Estevanico was part of the Narvaez expedition with some other 300 men. The expedition was led by the newly appointed governor of La Florida, Panfilo de Narvaez. They left Cuba in February 1528 on a mission to go to Isla de las Palmas, near present-day Tampico, Mexico. They planned to establish new settlements in that region. However, strong winds forced them to the western coast of Florida. The fleet fortunately landed in present-day St. Petersburg, Florida, on the shores of Boca Ciega Bay. Narvaez was dissatisfied and ordered his ships with 100 men and 10 women to sail north in search of a large harbor, which he was assured was nearby. He then led another 300 men with 42 horses and moved along the coast with hopes of rejoining with his ships at the large harbor. Unfortunately, there was no border north of Boca Ciega Bay, and Narvaez never saw his ships again. The group later marched 300 miles north and got into an armed confrontation with the Native
300 miles.
The survivors built boats to sail westward along the Gulf Coast shoreline with hopes of reaching Pianuco and the Rio de las Palmas. Unfortunately, they faced a storm when they were near Galveston Island, Texas. Just 80 men out of the 300 survived the storm and were washed ashore at Galveston
Black man Ben knew how to navigate throughout the world.
And 2 other survivors from one boat became enslaved by Coalitican Indians. In 1532, they were reunited with a survivor from another boat, and the 4 survivors spent years as slaves on the Texas Barrier Islands. In 1534, Estevanico and other 3 survivors, Andres Dorantes de Carranza, Alonso del Castillo Maldonado, and Cabeza de Vaca, finally escaped their captivity.
See how they changed all our original names.
In southwestern U.S. and northern Mexico. They became medicine men. As medicine men, they served as traditional healers and spiritual leaders, serving the indigenous people of the Americas. They became the first Europeans and Africans to enter the American West.
That's where Dr. Sevi found his medicine man in Mexico.
Reached the Spanish settlement in Sinaloa. After some time, they left there and traveled 1,000 miles to the south to Mexico City. Traveling as medicine men, Estevanico and his other 3 companions were welcomed and treated with great respect. They were offered food, shelter, and gifts from different villages, who also held celebrations in their honor. They moved from one village to another, and oftentimes, followed by more than 3,000 people, Estevanico and his other 3 companions traveled through different parts of the continent and western Mexico into the Sonoran Desert to the region of Sonora in New Spain, which is present-day Mexico. After finding a small Spanish settlement, the 4 survivors traveled 1,000 miles to the south of Mexico City and arrived in July 1536.
Spain and Morocco is only 8 miles apart, the Strait of Gibraltar.
Their 8-year survival journey and also detailed the life
Northwest
of
Africa.
It was reprinted in 1555 and became the first published book to describe the people, wildlife, flora, and fauna of inland North America, and was also the first to describe the American bison. In the book, Cabeza de Vaca often referred to Estevanico as their leader, as he went ahead of the other 3 survivors. He had learned some parts of the indigenous language and was able to interact with them. When Estevanico arrived in Mexico City, Antonio de Mendoza, who was the viceroy of New Spain, appointed him as the guide in expeditions to the north. In 1539, Estevanico left Mexico City and traveled to Sinaloa. There, he accompanied Friar Marcos de Niza.
He traveled to Sinaloa. You know that's a real big Mexican cartel right now. And the black man was one of the first ones to own those territories and be involved with the indigenous people of that land.